Anthony. He stopped being my father the moment he pointed at me in that living room and put a price on my head. I said steadily, I am not an Evans anymore. You told me that. I am yours. Anthony stared at me. For a long, agonizing minute, he didn't move. He was reading me, looking for the lie, looking for the hesitation. Then, he reached out. He took my hand, the one that had held the napkin, and brought it to his lips. He pressed a kiss to my knuckles, slow and deliberate. It wasn't just a gesture of affection. It was a seal, a knight swearing fealty to his queen. He tried to use you as a weapon against me, Anthony whispered against my skin. He thought you were weak. He thought you would panic and hide. He doesn't know me, I whispered back. No, Anthony agreed. He lowered my hand but didn't let go. His fingers interlaced with mine, locking us together. But I do. He tapped the partition glass. The driver lowered it an inch. Change of plans, Anthony said. Cancel the shipment tonight. Initiate protocol silence on the warehouses. And find Thomas Evans. I don't care where he is. Turn over every rock in Queens. Yes, boss. The window went up. Anthony looked back at me. The fury was there now, burning deep in his eyes. But it wasn't directed at me. It was a cold, protective rage that made the air in the car vibrate. You chose me, he said, sounding almost awed by the fact. I chose the person who protects me, I said. I chose the person who sees me. He pulled me across the seat, hauling me into his lap. The gold dress spilled over his dark trousers like molten metal. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. You are not just payment, Lucia, he growled against my pulse. You are the most dangerous thing I have ever owned, and I will burn the city to the ground before I let them touch you. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, holding on tight. The car sped through the night, carrying us away from the gala, away from the lies, and towards a war that was now inevitable. What do we do now? I asked. Anthony pulled back to look at me. His eyes were hard, but his hand on my waist was gentle. Now, he said, we stop playing defense. If the O'Sullivans want a war, we give them a massacre. And your father is going to learn that some debts can't be paid with money. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg for mercy. I nodded. Okay, I said. And in that word, I sealed my fate. I wasn't an observer anymore. I was an accomplice. And as Anthony's lips crashed onto mine, searing and possessive, I realized I wouldn't have it any other way. The girl in the corner was dead. The woman in the gold dress was ready to reign. The transition from the golden warmth of the gala to the cold, militaristic precision of the penthouse was jarring. The silence that filled the apartment wasn't the peaceful quiet of luxury anymore. It was the holding breath of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. Anthony moved with a terrifying efficiency. He had stripped off his tuxedo jacket and the silk tie, replacing them with a tactical vest that he strapped over his white dress shirt. He didn't look like a businessman now. He didn't even look like a mob boss. He looked like a soldier preparing for a siege. I stood by the kitchen island, still wearing the gold dress, though I felt ridiculous in it now. The silk felt too thin, too fragile for the reality that had just crashed into our lives. The perimeter is sealed, Anthony said, checking the magazine of a handgun, before sliding it into a holster at his hip. I have 6 men in the lobby, 2 in the elevator shaft, and 3 on the roof. The blast shutters are down on the windows. You are safer here than in the president's bunker. And you? I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Where are you going? To end it, he replied. He walked over to me, stopping just inches away. The smell of expensive cologne was gone, replaced by the scent of gun oil and cold resolve. He reached out, cupping my face in his hands. His thumbs traced my cheekbones, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. I am going to find your father. I am going to find the O'Sullivans. And I am going to make sure they never threaten this house again. Don't go alone, I whispered. I'm not alone. I have my best men, but I need to lead this, Lucia. They insulted me. They threatened you. This is personal. He leaned his forehead against mine. Stay here. Do not open the door for anyone but me. If the secure line rings, answer it. It will be the code word Vesuvius. That means extraction. Do you understand? Vesuvius, I repeated. I understand. He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was hard, possessive, a promise of return. Then he pulled away, turned, and walked out the door without looking back. The heavy lock clicked into place, sealing me inside the golden cage. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. I should have gone to my room. I should have taken a bath, washed off the night, and waited like a good little asset. But my mind was racing. The image of Eleanor O'Sullivan's smile, the venom in her voice when she spoke of my father, the absolute certainty that Thomas Evans was selling me out, it all churned in my stomach like acid. I couldn't just sit. I went to my room and stripped off the gold dress, letting it pool on the floor like shed skin. I pulled on black jeans, heavy boots, and a dark cashmere sweater. I needed to feel armored. Then, I went to the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Taped to the underside was a burner phone. An old, cracked smartphone that had belonged to my father years ago. I had kept it not out of sentiment, but out of paranoia. When I moved in, I had swapped the SIM card for a prepaid one I'd bought with cash from the antique shop job. Anthony knew everything about me, but he didn't know about this phone. Everyone needs a secret, I had told myself. I turned it on. The screen flickered to life, the battery bar hovering at 15%. It vibrated immediately. My heart slammed against my ribs. No one had this number. No one except the emergency contact list I had set up for my father years ago in case he ended up in a hospital or a ditch. I opened the message. Sender, Dad. Time, 11:42. Lucia. I know you hate me. I know what Eleanor told you. She's lying. I'm not selling you out. I'm trying to save you. They know Anthony is coming. It's an ambush. The driver, Marco, is on their payroll. They are taking him to the shipping yards, not Queens. Pier 4, they have a sniper team waiting. Please, I messed up, but I won't let you die. Tell him. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. A trap. My mind raced, analyzing the data like I analyzed a fraudulent painting. Was it true? My father was a liar. Yes. A manipulator, absolutely. But he was also a coward. If Anthony died, the Ravellini empire would crumble, and the O'Sullivans would have no reason to keep Thomas alive. His safety depended on the balance of power. If the O'Sullivans took over, they would just kill him to tie up loose ends. His only chance of survival was chaos, or Anthony winning. The logic held. The driver? Marco. I had seen him talking to one of the O'Sullivan guards at the gala. Just a nod. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time, but now? I dialed Anthony's number on the secure house line. Beep, beep, beep. The number you have reached is not in service. Protocol silence. He had cut communications to prevent tracking. He was walking into a kill box, and he was deaf to the warning. I paced the living room floor. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced it down. I was Lucia Evans. I was the woman who spotted a fake Chagall from across the room. I didn't panic. I solved problems. If I stayed here, Anthony would go to the shipping yards. Marco would drive him right into the crosshairs. Anthony would die. And then the O'Sullivans would come here, override the security with Marco's help, and drag me out. If I left, I stopped pacing. I looked at the message again. Pier 4. I knew Pier 4. It was an old Ravellini drop point that had been abandoned years ago. It was isolated. If I could get there, if I could get close enough to signal him, or create a distraction, but I couldn't just walk out. The guards in the lobby would stop me, unless I gave them a reason not to. I ran to the office. I grabbed a piece of heavy stationery from Anthony's desk. I wrote quickly, my handwriting sharp and angular. Protocol override. Thomas contacted me. He claims ambush at Pier 4. I have the encryption keys for the O'Sullivan accounts. The bluff. I am going to the secondary extraction point to trade for the intel. Do not follow me. Secure the perimeter. I will contact via Vesuvius channel. It was a lie, partially. But it sounded authoritative. It sounded like something the partner of Anthony Ravellini would do. I left the note on the kitchen island, right next to his espresso machine where the head of security would check during his rounds in 20 minutes. Then, I went to the service elevator. I knew the code. I had watched Anthony punch it in 3 weeks ago. 1982. The year of the fake wine. He had a sense of humor. I punched it in. The doors slid open. I took a deep breath. I was leaving the safety of the fortress. I was walking back into the dark, but as the elevator descended, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a player moving a piece on the board. Getting out of the building was easier than it should have been, which should have been my first warning. I used the service exit that led into the alleyway, bypassing the main lobby guards. The night air was freezing, biting through my sweater. I didn't take one of Anthony's cars. They were all tracked. I walked 3 blocks, keeping to the shadows, my boots silent on the wet pavement. I found a taxi stand near the metro station. Queens, I told the driver, near the shipyards, and step on it. The ride was a blur of neon lights and rain-streaked windows. I gripped the burner phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept checking the time. 12:15 a.m. Anthony would be arriving soon. The taxi dropped me off a block away from the entrance to the pier. The area was desolate. Rusted fences, piles of shipping containers, the smell of salt water and rotting wood. I paid the driver with the cash I had stashed in my boot weeks ago and waited for him to leave. I moved toward Pier 4. It was dark, the only light coming from a single floodlight buzzing overhead. I didn't see Anthony's SUV. I didn't see Marco. I crept closer, hiding behind a stack of wooden pallets. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure it echoed off the metal containers. "Dad?" I whispered, looking at the phone. "Where are you?" My phone buzzed. "Inside the warehouse, 2nd floor office. I can see the entrance. Hurry, they're setting up." I looked at the warehouse. The side door was slightly ajar. Logic told me to wait. Logic told me to wait for Anthony. But fear for the man I loved, overrode the logic. If the sniper was already set up, Anthony wouldn't even make it out of the car. I slipped through the side door. The warehouse was cavernous, filled with shadows and the sound of dripping water. I kept low, moving toward the metal staircase that led to the foreman's office overlooking the floor. I climbed the stairs, testing each step for sound. I reached the top. The office door was closed. I could see a sliver of light underneath it. I took a breath, reached into my boot, and pulled out a small switchblade I had swiped from Anthony's collection in the library. It wasn't much against guns, but it was better than fingernails. I pushed the door open. "Dad?" Thomas Evans was sitting in a rolling chair in the center of the room. He wasn't tied up. He wasn't bleeding. He was holding a sandwich in one hand and a bottle of beer in the other. He looked up at me, and for a second, he looked surprised. Then a slow, pathetic smile spread across his face. "You actually came," he said, chewing. "I told them you would. I told them you were loyal." I froze. The knife felt heavy in my hand. I looked around the room. It was empty. No snipers. No view of the ambush. Just my father, looking comfortable. "Where is the ambush?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Where is Anthony?" "Anthony isn't coming here, Lucia," Thomas said, taking a sip of beer. "Anthony is halfway to Jersey by now, chasing a ghost lead I gave Eleanor to feed him. He's fine. Well, he's furious, but he's alive." The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The air left my lungs. "You lied," I said. "I improvised," he corrected. He set the beer down. "See, the O'Sullivans, they didn't want Anthony tonight. They wanted you. They figured if they attacked the penthouse, Anthony would turn it into a fortress. They'd lose 50 men trying to get in. But if I could convince you that he was in danger, well, you'd walk right out the front door." He stood up, wiping crumbs from his shirt. "And look at you. You did. You walked right into the trade." "Trade?" I stepped back, gripping the knife. "What trade?" "My debt for you," Thomas said simply. 100 grand. That's what I owe. Eleanor said if I delivered you, the slate is clean. Plus, they give me a bus ticket to Florida and 5 grand in walking around money. He looked at me with those watery, weak eyes, the eyes I had inherited. "It's a good deal, Lucia. Anthony will find another girl. He's rich. But me? I was out of options. You sold me, I whispered. Again. I saved myself, he snapped, his voice rising. Do you know what they do to people who don't pay? They were going to cut off my fingers, Lucia. One by one. You're young. You're pretty. You'll survive whatever they want. You're tough. Like your mother. Don't you dare speak her name, I hissed. I raised the knife. You are sick. You are a disease. I'm a survivor, he yelled. Just like you. No. A deep voice came from the shadows behind me. She is nothing like you. I spun around. Emerging from the darkness of the stairwell were 3 men. I recognized the center one immediately. Patrick O'Sullivan, the bulldog from the gala. He was flanked by 2 guards who looked like they were carved out of granite. Drop the knife, darling, Patrick said, his voice grating like gravel. Or I shoot your father, which, honestly, would be doing the world a favor. But a deal is a deal. I looked at Patrick. Then I looked at Thomas. My father was shrinking back, looking terrified now that the reality of the O'Sullivans was in the room. Lucia, put it down, Thomas pleaded. Don't make them mad. I looked at the knife. It was useless against 3 armed men. I wasn't going to win a firefight. Not here, not alone. I dropped the knife. It clattered loudly on the metal floor. Smart girl, Patrick grinned. He signaled his men. One of them moved forward, grabbing my arms and twisting them behind my back. He slapped a pair of zip ties onto my wrists. The plastic bit into my skin, tight and painful. The debt is cleared? Thomas asked, his voice trembling. I can go? Patrick looked at Thomas with pure disgust. Yeah, you can go. Get out of my city, Evans. If I see you again, I'll kill you just for the smell. Thomas didn't wait. He grabbed his jacket. He started to walk toward the door, passing me. He paused for a second. He looked at me, bound and captured because I had tried to save the man I loved. Because I had believed, for one stupid second, that my father had a shred of humanity left. It's for the best, Lucia, he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. You'll see. Rage, cold, and absolute flooded my veins. It replaced the fear. It replaced the shock. Thomas, I said. He looked up, surprised I spoke. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I gathered every ounce of saliva in my mouth and spat right in his face. It hit him on the cheek, running down toward his chin. He flinched back as if I had burned him. You aren't my father, I said, my voice dead calm. And you didn't save yourself. You just dug a grave. Because when Anthony finds out what you did, Florida won't be far enough. Hell won't be far enough. Thomas wiped his face, looking shaken. He didn't say anything else. He turned and ran out of the room, a rat scurrying off a sinking ship. Patrick O'Sullivan laughed. He walked over to me, grabbing my chin roughly in his hand. He forced me to look at him. You got fire, he noted. I like that. Anthony always did have a taste for the wild ones. He's going to kill you, I said. He's going to burn this entire city down to find me. Patrick's smile faded. Let him try. By the time he finds you, darling, you're going to be the bait in a trap so big even he can't chew his way out of it. He pulled a black hood from his pocket. Nighty night, princess. He jammed the hood over my head. My world went black. The last thing I smelled was the stale beer my father had been drinking and the cheap cologne of the O'Sullivan goon. I didn't struggle as they dragged me out. I didn't scream. I saved my energy. I thought about the note I had left. I thought about the encryption keys I had mentioned. The bluff. And I thought about Anthony. He hadn't been ambushed. He was safe. He was alive. And that meant he was coming. Hold on, I told myself as they threw me into the back of a van. Just hold on. The engine roared to life, and the van lurched forward, carrying me away from the only home I had ever known. But as the darkness swallowed me, I didn't feel helpless. I felt a cold, calculating resolve hardening in my chest. My father had sold me for a bus ticket. The O'Sullivans had taken me for leverage, but they had all made one critical mistake. They thought they had captured a damsel. They didn't realize they had just kidnapped the queen. And the king was about to flip the board. The hood was ripped off my head, taking a few strands of hair with it. The sudden assault of fluorescent light was blinding, stinging my eyes like acid. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the spots dancing in my vision, forcing my senses to recalibrate. The smell hit me first: diesel fumes, rust, and the metallic tang of old blood. I was seated in a metal chair, my wrists zip-tied painfully behind my back, my ankles bound to the chair legs. Welcome back to the land of the living, sleeping beauty. Patrick O'Sullivan was leaning against a stack of crates a few feet away, twirling a heavy black pistol around his finger. We weren't in the office anymore. We were on the ground floor of a massive warehouse, a cathedral of corrugated steel and concrete. It was cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones and stays there. I straightened my spine. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me slump. "You're making a mistake," I said. My voice was raspy, but steady. "I don't think so." Patrick grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "I have the girl. I have the leverage. And soon I'll have the encryption keys to Ravellini's offshore accounts. Unless you lied about those?" "I didn't lie," I said, maintaining the bluff I had written in the note. "But I don't carry them in my head. They're on a secure server. You need my biometrics to access them." "We'll get your biometrics," he said dismissively. "One way or another. Fingerprints are easy to take, even if they aren't attached to the hand anymore." I felt a cold shiver trace down my spine, but I locked it away. "Anthony will be here." "Anthony is chasing his tail in Jersey," Patrick laughed. "Your daddy did a good job, sold the lie perfectly." "Did he?" The voice didn't come from me. It came from the shadows near the loading dock doors. Patrick spun around, raising his gun. His 6 guards, positioned around the perimeter, snapped their weapons up. Emerging from the darkness wasn't a SWAT team. It wasn't a roaring army. It was just Anthony Ravellini. He walked into the circle of light with a terrifying, casual grace. He wasn't wearing his tactical vest anymore. He had discarded it, leaving him in a white dress shirt that was stark against the gloom. His hands were empty. He held them out to his sides, palms open. "Anthony," Patrick sneered, though I saw his grip on the gun tighten. "You're faster than I thought. But you're stupid. Walking in here alone?" "I'm not alone," Anthony said calmly. He stopped 10 feet away from us. He didn't look at Patrick. He looked at me. His dark eyes swept over my face, checking for bruises, for blood. When he saw I was unharmed, a muscle in his jaw ticked, the only sign of the volcano erupting beneath his skin. "I brought a gift," Anthony signaled with 2 fingers. From the darkness behind him, 2 of his enforcers dragged a man into the light. They didn't walk him. They hauled him by his armpits, his feet dragging uselessly on the concrete. They threw him to the floor at Patrick's feet. It was Thomas Evans. My father looked like he had been through a blender. His lip was split, his eye swollen shut, and he was sobbing. Incoherent pleas for mercy bubbling from his lips. He was clutching a duffel bag, the bag containing the money and bus ticket Patrick had promised him. "He was trying to catch a cab on 4th Avenue, Anthony said, his voice devoid of emotion. "He seemed in a rush. I thought he should stay for the party." Patrick looked down at Thomas, then back at Anthony. "You caught him. Congratulations. He's garbage anyway. I was done with him. He sold you something that didn't belong to him," Anthony said. He took a step forward. The O'Sullivan guards tensed, fingers twitching on triggers. "He sold you my wife." The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute, detonating somewhere deep in my chest. Wife. Not collateral, not asset, not debt. Maybe a weaponized word in front of these men, but it wrapped itself around my throat all the same. Patrick laughed. A harsh barking sound. "Wife? She's payment, Anthony. She's a debt settlement. Don't try to romanticize it. You bought a whore, and I stole her." "She's not payment," Anthony said. His voice dropped, becoming a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "She is the only thing in this city worth more than my empire, and you made the mistake of touching her. I have 6 guns on you," Patrick snarled, losing his patience. "And I have a gun on her head." He moved fast, pressing the barrel of his pistol against my temple. The metal was cold. I stopped breathing. "One move, Anthony, and I paint the wall with her brains. Drop to your knees." Anthony didn't move. He didn't drop. He stared at Patrick with a look of supreme boredom. "You won't shoot her," Anthony said. "Because if you do, you lose the encryption keys. You lose the leverage. And my sniper, who is currently aiming at your medulla oblongata from the catwalk, will turn your head into a canoe." Patrick froze. His eyes darted up to the dark rafters. "You're bluffing," Patrick whispered. "Am I?" Anthony tilted his head. "Lucia, tell him." "Do I bluff?" I looked at Anthony. I saw the slight shift in his stance, the way his weight was balanced on the balls of his feet. He was coiled energy, waiting for a trigger. "He doesn't bluff," I said clearly. "He calculates." "Drop the gun, Patrick," Anthony commanded. "And I might let you leave here with your life. I'll keep the warehouse, of course. Consider it a penalty for the inconvenience." Patrick's face twisted in rage. He was trapped. He knew it. If he shot me, he died. If he surrendered, he lost face. He was a cornered rat, and rats bite. "Screw you," Patrick screamed. "Kill him. Kill them all." He didn't shoot me. He swung the gun toward Anthony. Time seemed to fracture. In the split second before Patrick pulled the trigger, Anthony moved. He didn't dive for cover. He dove forward. At the same time, I threw my weight violently to the right. The chair tipped over, crashing onto the concrete just as a bullet whizzed through the space where my head had been a second ago. Chaos erupted. The sound of gunfire was deafening in the enclosed space. Crack, crack, crack. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. I couldn't see much from my angle, just flashes of muzzle fire and boots scrambling. "Secure the girl!" I heard Anthony roar. I struggled against the zip ties, twisting my wrists until the skin broke. The plastic bit deep, but the adrenaline numbed the pain. A pair of boots landed next to my face. It was one of the O'Sullivan guards. He reached down, grabbing my arm to haul me up, using me as a human shield. "Get up, bitch!" I didn't get up. I coiled my legs and kicked out with everything I had. The heel of my heavy boot connected solidly with his kneecap. There was a sickening crunch. The guard screamed, his leg buckling backward. He fell, dropping his gun. The gun slid across the concrete, stopping inches from my face. I couldn't use my hands, but I wasn't helpless. I rolled onto my back, maneuvering my bound hands under my hips, then my legs, pulling my body through the circle of my arms like a contortionist, until my hands were in front of me. It dislocated my thumb, a sharp, blinding pop of pain. But my hands were forward. I grabbed the gun. The guard was trying to stand on his broken leg, reaching for his knife. I didn't hesitate. I pointed the gun and squeezed the trigger. The recoil jarred my injured thumb, but the guard dropped, a hole in his shoulder. I scrambled to my knees, scanning the room. Anthony was a blur of violence. He had disarmed Patrick and was engaged in hand-to-hand combat with 2 other guards. He moved with a brutal efficiency, using their own momentum against them. He broke an arm, shattered a jaw, and used one man as a shield against the other. But there were too many of them. Another guard appeared on the catwalk, aiming a rifle down at Anthony's exposed back. "Anthony! Above you!" I screamed. Anthony didn't look up. He rolled, grabbing a discarded pistol from the floor and firing blindly over his shoulder. The guard on the catwalk tumbled over the railing, crashing into a stack of pallets. But in the distraction, Patrick had recovered his weapon. He was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, aiming at me. "You die first," Patrick yelled. I tried to bring my gun up, but my dislocated thumb made my grip weak. I wasn't going to be fast enough. A shadow moved in front of me. Anthony. He stepped into the line of fire just as Patrick pulled the trigger. The impact was audible, a wet, heavy thud. Anthony jerked back, his body shielding mine completely. "No!" I screamed. Anthony didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. He raised his own gun, his face a mask of cold fury, and fired once. Patrick O'Sullivan's head snapped back. He collapsed instantly, the threat extinguished. Silence slammed back into the room, ringing in my ears louder than the gunshots. Anthony stood there for a second, swaying slightly. A dark stain was spreading rapidly across the white shirt, just below his left shoulder. "Anthony!" I gasped, scrambling to my feet. I dropped the gun and reached for him. He turned to me. His face was pale, beads of sweat standing out on his forehead. But his eyes were clear. He looked at me, scanning for injuries again. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was rough, strained. "Am I hurt?" I choked out a hysterical laugh. "You've been shot. Through and through." He dismissed, though he flinched when he moved his arm. "Missed the bone. I've had worse shaving." He looked around the room. The O'Sullivan guards were either dead or incapacitated. His own men were securing the perimeter, moving with professional silence. Then, Anthony's gaze landed on the far corner. Thomas Evans was huddled behind a crate, clutching his bag of money, shaking like a leaf. He had watched the whole thing, cowering while his daughter fought for her life. Anthony walked over to him. He moved slower now, the adrenaline fading, pain setting in. I followed him, my hand still bound in front of me with the zip ties. Thomas looked up. "Mr. Ravellini, I didn't know they would—" Anthony kicked the bag of money out of Thomas's hands. It slid across the floor, spilling bundles of cash into a puddle of oil. "Get up," Anthony ordered. Thomas scrambled to his feet, pressing his back against the wall. "Please, I helped you. I led you here." "You led her here," Anthony corrected. He grabbed Thomas by the collar of his cheap jacket and slammed him against the corrugated steel wall. The sound boomed through the warehouse. "You used her loyalty against her. You traded her life for a bus ticket." "I'm her father," Thomas wailed. "You are a donor," Anthony spat. "A biological accident." Anthony pulled a knife from his belt. Thomas shrieked, closing his eyes, but Anthony didn't stab him. He reached out and slashed the zip ties on my wrists. My hands fell free, throbbing. "Lucia," Anthony said, not looking away from my father. "This is your debt to clear. Tell me what to do." I looked at Thomas. I looked at the man who had raised me, who had gambled away my childhood, and who had finally tried to sell my future. I looked at the fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of losing me. It was fear of pain. I felt nothing. The anger had burned out, leaving only cold ash. "Don't kill him," I said quietly. Thomas let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Lucia. I knew you loved me. I'm not doing it for you." I cut him off. I stepped closer, cradling my injured hand. "I'm doing it for him." I nodded at Anthony. "I don't want your blood on his conscience. You aren't worth the stain on his soul." I looked at Anthony. "Exile him." Anthony nodded slowly. "Where?" "Nowhere nice," I said. "Alaska. Or maybe a rig in the North Sea. Somewhere cold, somewhere hard, somewhere without a casino." Anthony leaned in close to Thomas. "You heard her. You have 1 hour to leave the state. My men will escort you to the airport. You get a one-way ticket to Nome. If you ever set foot in New York again, if you ever call her, if you ever speak her name." Anthony pressed the knife blade against Thomas's cheek, drawing a single drop of blood. "I will peel you apart slowly." He let go. Thomas slid down the wall, weeping. He didn't look at me. He looked at the spilled money on the floor, mourning the loss of his payout. "Get him out of my sight," Anthony ordered his men. 2 guards grabbed Thomas and dragged him away. He didn't fight. He just hung limp, a broken man who had finally run out of luck. I watched him go. I didn't feel sad. I felt lighter. The anchor was finally cut. "Lucia." I turned. Anthony was leaning heavily against a crate now, his hand pressed over the wound on his shoulder. Blood was seeping between his fingers, dark and alarming. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said, panic rising again. "The car," he grunted. "Medical kit. In the back." I grabbed his good arm, wrapping it around my shoulders to support him. He was heavy, dead weight, but I found strength I didn't know I had. We walked out of the warehouse, leaving the carnage behind us. The night air outside was crisp and clean. The rain had stopped. The black SUV was waiting, engine idling. I helped him into the back seat and climbed in after him. "Drive!" I yelled at the driver. "Fast!" The car peeled out of the lot. I immediately went for the medical kit under the seat. I popped the latches and pulled out gauze and pressure bandages. This is going to hurt, I warned him, my hands shaking as I cut open his shirt. The wound was ugly, a ragged hole in the muscle, but the bleeding was steady, not spurting. No artery. Do it, Anthony gritted out through clenched teeth. I pressed the gauze pad onto the wound. He groaned, his head falling back against the leather seat, his eyes squeezing shut. I applied pressure, leaning my weight onto his shoulder. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears finally stinging my eyes. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have come. I walked right into it. Anthony opened his eyes. They were hazy with pain, but they locked onto mine with that familiar intensity. He reached up with his bloody hand and cupped the back of my neck, pulling me down until our foreheads touched. You came, he rasped. You came for me. I thought you were in trouble. You were wrong, he said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But you were brave. Stupid. Reckless. But brave. I kicked a guy, I sniffled, a laugh bubbling up through the tears. I saw, he murmured. Excellent form. He shifted his grip, his fingers tangling in my hair. The smell of copper and gunpowder filled the small space between us. You took a bullet for me, I said. I told you, he whispered, his gaze dropping to my mouth. I protect what is mine. Is that what I am? I asked. Yours? Lucia, he breathed. You have been mine since the moment you looked me in the eye in that living room and didn't blink. I just needed you to realize it. He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled my head down and crushed his lips against mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of blood and fear and survival. It was the kiss of two people who had looked death in the face and spat in its eye. I kissed him back with everything I had, pouring all my relief, all my anger, all my love into it. My hands were covered in his blood. His hand was tangling in my hair. The pain in my thumb, the ache in my shoulder. It all faded into the background. All that mattered was the heat of his mouth and the beat of his heart against my chest. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, he didn't let me go. He kept his forehead pressed to mine. You're not leaving, he stated. It wasn't a question. No, I whispered. I'm not leaving. Good. He closed his eyes, his breathing evening out as the adrenaline crash hit him. Because I'm not letting you go. Not after tonight. Not ever. I looked down at his sleeping face, at the harsh lines softened by exhaustion. I pressed the bandage tighter against his shoulder. We were bloodied. We were battered. My father was gone. Exiled to the ice. The O'Sullivans were broken. The war was over. But looking at Anthony Ravellini, I knew the reign was just beginning. And this time, I wasn't just a spectator. I was sitting on the throne right beside him. Drive, I whispered to the driver, my voice steel. Take us home. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the penthouse not as a fortress, but as a sanctuary. The silence that greeted us was profound, a stark contrast to the cacophony of gunfire and screaming metal we had left behind at the warehouse. I helped Anthony into the living room. He was heavy against me, his adrenaline fading, leaving behind the raw, grinding reality of a bullet wound. His face was pale, a sheen of sweat clinging to his forehead. But he didn't complain. He didn't groan. He just moved with a grim determination. One foot in front of the other. The sofa, I commanded, guiding him toward the long leather couch. I need the light. He sat down heavily, his good hand immediately going to his shoulder. The makeshift bandage I had applied in the car was soaked through, dark crimson staining the white linen of his shirt. I need whiskey, he rasped, leaning his head back. And the medical kit is in the bathroom cabinet. Bottom shelf. I know where it is. I ran to the bathroom. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to steady. I washed the blood, his blood, the guard's blood, off my skin with scalding water. I grabbed the kit, a bottle of antiseptic, and clean towels. When I returned to the living room, Anthony had already poured himself a glass of amber liquid from the decanter on the side table. He downed it in one swallow, the muscles of his throat working. Take off the shirt, I said, setting the supplies on the coffee table. He fumbled with the buttons, his fingers clumsy from pain. I batted his hands away gently. Let me. I knelt between his legs. I unbuttoned the ruined shirt, peeling the fabric away from his skin. The wound was ugly, a jagged tear where the bullet had passed through the deltoid muscle. It was bleeding sluggishly now, but it was deep. "It needs stitches," I said, examining it with the same clinical eye I used to assess a damaged canvas. "The edges are too far apart for butterfly strips." "Do it," Anthony said. He watched me, his dark eyes unfocused but intense. "You have the hands for it. Steady. I restore paintings, Anthony. Canvas doesn't bleed. Flesh is just a different medium," he muttered, closing his eyes. I threaded the needle. I cleaned the wound with alcohol. He hissed through his teeth, his body seizing up for a second before forcibly relaxing. I worked quickly. I didn't apologize for the pain. Apologies wouldn't close the hole. I focused on the task, treating his skin with reverence. Stitch, pull, knot. Stitch, pull, knot. The silence in the room was intimate, broken only by the sound of his breathing and the soft click of the scissors. When I tied the final knot and taped a sterile bandage over the area, I sat back on my heels, exhausted. "It's done," I whispered. Anthony opened his eyes. He looked at the bandage, then at me. He reached out with his good arm, his hand cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed over my lower lip, tracing the shape of it. "You saved me tonight," he said. His voice was low, stripped of all the bravado, all the power dynamics. "Not in the warehouse. Here. Now. You saved me first," I replied, leaning into his touch. "You stepped in front of a bullet. I would step in front of a train for you," he said simply. The air between us shifted. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something heavier, hotter. The adrenaline that had kept us moving was transforming into a different kind of hunger. We had survived. We were alive. And the need to reaffirm that life, to feel it in every nerve ending, was overwhelming. "Lucia," he breathed, his gaze dropping to my lips. "Come here." I didn't hesitate. I stood up and straddled his lap, mindful of his injured shoulder. I wrapped my arms around his neck, burying my face in the curve of his throat. He smelled of whiskey, copper, and sandalwood. He smelled like home. "I thought I lost you," I confessed against his skin. "When Patrick had the gun." "You will never lose me," Anthony swore, his hand tangled in my hair, pulling my head back so he could look at me. "I am a difficult man to kill, especially now that I have something to live for." He kissed me. This wasn't like the kiss in the car. That was desperate. This was deliberate. It was a claiming. It was a slow, burning fuse that ignited everything it touched. His lips were demanding, moving against mine with a possessive rhythm that made my toes curl. I opened to him, tasting the whiskey on his tongue, meeting his fire with my own. His hand slid down my back, finding the hem of my sweater. His touch was electric, searing through the cashmere. I helped him, pulling the sweater over my head, discarding it on the floor next to his bloody shirt. Skin on skin. The friction was intoxicating. I traced the muscles of his chest, avoiding the bandage, feeling the heavy thud of his heart beneath my palm. It was beating for me. "The contract," he murmured, breaking the kiss to look into my eyes. "It's void." "I know," I whispered. "I'm not here because of a debt." "Say it," he commanded. "Tell me why you are here." "Because I want you," I said, my voice trembling with the truth of it. "Because I choose this. I choose you." He groaned, a sound torn from his chest, and pulled me closer. There were no more words. There was only the heat of the penthouse, the city lights watching from a distance, and the two of us, finally breaking down the last walls between us. It wasn't a transaction. It wasn't payment. It was a collision of two souls who had been forged in the fire and found they were made of the same steel. We moved together with a desperate, beautiful rhythm, erasing the violence of the night with the tenderness of the morning. I fell asleep in his arms, his good arm draped over me like a shield, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the only lullaby I needed. The morning sun didn't feel intrusive. It felt victorious. I woke up alone in the bed. For a moment, panic flared. Old habits die hard. But then I saw the note on the pillow. Meeting with the capos. 9 a.m. Wear armor. I smiled. He hadn't left me behind. He was inviting me to the war room. I got up, my body aching in a pleasant, lingering way. I showered, scrubbing away the last remnants of the warehouse. I stood before the wardrobe, looking at the rows of clothes Anthony had bought for me. Wear armor. I pushed aside the dresses. Today wasn't a day for silk and flow. Today was a day for structure. I chose a pair of high-waisted black trousers, tailored to perfection. I paired them with a crisp white silk button-down shirt, tucking it in sharply. I added a black blazer with sharp shoulders, power dressing at its finest. No jewelry except the diamond earrings. Hair pulled back in a severe, sleek ponytail. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a mistress. I looked like a CEO. I looked like a Ravellini. I walked out of the room and headed toward the office. I could hear voices drifting down the hallway. Low, rumbling, masculine voices. Tension hung in the air like cigar smoke. The double doors to the office were closed. 2 guards stood outside. They saw me coming. They saw the way I walked, chin up, eyes forward. They didn't ask for ID. They stepped aside and opened the doors. I walked in. The room went silent. Around the long mahogany table sat the inner circle of the Ravellini crime family. 8 men. Hard men. Men with scars and expensive suits and outdated ideas about women. Anthony sat at the head of the table. His left arm was in a sling, hidden beneath his suit jacket, draped over his shoulder. He looked pale, but his eyes were alert, dangerous. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked proud. "Gentlemen?" Anthony said, his voice cutting through the silence. "You all know Lucia. We know who she is. One of the capos, a man named Russo, no relation to the other family, grunted. He didn't look at me. He looked at Anthony. We heard what happened last night. We heard you took a bullet. For a girl. The disrespect was subtle, but it was there. The implication was clear. You are weak. You let a woman compromise you. I took a bullet eliminating the head of the O'Sullivan family." Anthony corrected coldly. "Patrick is dead. The O'Sullivan leadership is decapitated. Lucia moved because she believed there was a sniper waiting to put a hole in my skull the second I stepped out of the car. She acted to keep the man who runs this family alive. That sounds like a victory to me, Russo." "It's a mess," another capo argued. "The streets are going to be chaos. The O'Sullivan fronts, their money, it's all going to go underground. We missed the chance to seize their assets because we were too busy playing hero. This was my cue. I didn't ask for permission to speak. I walked to the head of the table, standing to Anthony's right. I placed a folder I had compiled from my mental notes onto the mahogany surface. "You're wrong," I said. Every head snapped toward me. The audacity of a woman speaking in this room was unheard of. "Excuse me?" Russo scoffed. "Anthony, get your pet under control." Anthony didn't move. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing to me. "The floor is yours, Lucia." I turned my gaze on Russo. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye, using the same cold calculation I used to spot a fake signature. "You think the O'Sullivan money is gone because you're looking for cash," I said, my voice steady and projecting to the back of the room. "You're looking for duffel bags and safes. But the O'Sullivans didn't keep their wealth in cash. They kept it in assets. Shell companies. Art. Real estate." I opened the folder. It was empty of paper. But I didn't need notes. I had a photographic memory for value. "Last night," I continued, pacing slowly down the length of the table. "While I was in their warehouse, I saw their shipping manifests. I saw their inventory." "So?" Russo challenged. "Junk. Not junk," I corrected. "Leverage. The O'Sullivans were laundering money through a gallery in Chelsea, the Gilded Frame. They were buying high-end antiques at inflated prices to clean their drug money. I know this because I saw a shipment of 18th century French furniture sitting in that warehouse. That shipment alone is worth $3 million on the legitimate market." The room went quiet. 3 million got their attention. "But more importantly," I said, turning back to face them, "I know where the paper trail leads. Patrick O'Sullivan was sloppy. He was buying fakes to cut costs, thinking no one would notice. If we seize those assets, we don't just get the furniture. We get the proof of tax fraud for every shell company attached to those purchases. We can use that leverage to blackmail their remaining lieutenants into flipping to our side. I stopped at the foot of the table. You're worried about chaos in the streets? There won't be chaos. Because by noon today, we will own their supply chain, their laundering fronts, and their loyalty. We don't need to shoot our way into their territory. We just need to buy the mortgage on their house and evict them. I looked around the table. I can identify every fake asset they hold. I can tell you which accounts are vulnerable. I can double the family's liquid capital in 3 months without firing a single bullet. I placed my hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. Anthony didn't take a bullet for a girl, I said, my voice hard as diamond. He took a bullet to secure the greatest asset this family has ever acquired. Me. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. It was heavy, thick with calculation. Russo looked at me. He looked at the folder. Then he looked at Anthony. Is she serious? Russo asked. She spotted a fake Renoir from across the room that cost me $2 million. Anthony said, a smirk playing on his lips. She's deadly serious. Russo looked back at me. The sneer was gone, replaced by a grudging, greedy respect. $3 million in furniture? He asked. Conservative estimate, I replied. If we auction it in London, maybe 4. Russo nodded slowly. He tapped his knuckles on the table. All right, Russo said. I'm listening. One by one, the other capos nodded. The tension in the room broke. They weren't looking at me like a mistress anymore. They were looking at me like a money printer. I walked back to Anthony's side. I didn't sit down. I stood next to his chair, my hand resting lightly on the back of it, just inches from his shoulder. Any objections? Anthony asked, his voice final. No, boss. The table murmured in unison. Good, Anthony said. Then get to work. Lucia will provide the list of targets. You seize them. Dismissed. The men stood up, gathering their things, filing out of the room with a new energy. They had a plan. They had a future. When the last door closed, Anthony let out a long breath. He slumped slightly, the pain in his shoulder clearly taking its toll now that the performance was over. I turned to him immediately, crouching down by his chair. You should be resting, I scolded gently. I'm fine, he said, reaching out to take my hand. He brought it to his lips, kissing the knuckles. You were magnificent. I was terrified, I admitted. You didn't show it. You walked in here and owned the room. You owned them. I just spoke their language, I said. Greed, Anthony chuckled, then winced. Greed is useful, but loyalty is rare. He looked at me, his dark eyes searching mine. They accepted you, he said. Do you realize what that means? You aren't just on the periphery anymore. You are in the center. There is no going back to a normal life after this. You are a Ravellini now, in blood and in business. I know, I said. I thought about the antique shop, about the quiet life of poverty I had left behind. It felt like a dream from another lifetime. I looked at the man in front of me, wounded, dangerous, and looking at me with a love that terrified me in its intensity. I don't want a normal life, Anthony. I want this. I want us. Good, he whispered, because I intend to keep you for a very long time. He pulled me up, guiding me to sit on his lap, careful of his sling. I rested my head on his good shoulder, looking out the massive glass window at the city below. The O'Sullivans were gone. My father was exiled. The capos were in line. We had won, but as I watched the clouds drift over the skyline, I knew the game never truly ended. There would always be new enemies, new debts, new threats, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. Let them come. Let them try. They would find us ready. The king and his queen, sitting in their high tower, watching the world burn and rebuilding it in our own image. Lucia? Anthony murmured against my hair. Yes, that furniture. Is it really worth $3 million? I smiled against his neck. Probably closer to 5, I whispered. But I like to under-promise and over-deliver. Anthony laughed, a rich, deep sound that filled the empty room. That's my girl. 6 months. 182 days. That was how long it had been since the night at the warehouse. Since the night the O'Sullivan empire crumbled and mine began. I stood in the center of the Ravellini Gallery's main showroom, surrounded by the quiet hum of extreme wealth. The space was cavernous, with polished concrete floors and stark white walls that made the art pop with almost violent intensity. Tonight was the opening of our Renaissance of Shadows exhibition, a curated collection of recovered 17th century Italian masterworks. Officially, I was the curator and director. Unofficially, I was the woman who had turned the Ravellini family's dirty money into a cultural institution so pristine that even the mayor was attending tonight. Director Evans? I turned. A young assistant, fresh out of Columbia and terrified of her own shadow, was holding a clipboard. "It's just Lucia, Sarah," I corrected gently, though I kept my posture rigid. "What is it?" The bidder for the Caravaggio. He's asking about the provenance documents. He says there's a gap in the ownership history between 1942 and 1946. I smiled. It was a practiced, shark-like smile I had learned from Anthony. "Tell Mr. Henderson that the gap exists because the painting was hidden in a monastery in Tuscany to protect it from the fascists." I lied smoothly. "And tell him if he asks again, the price goes up another 10% for historical research fees." Sarah's eyes widened. "Can we do that?" "We can do whatever we want, Sarah. We own the painting. We own the building. We practically own the block." She nodded frantically and scurried away. I took a sip of my sparkling water. The imposter syndrome that used to plague me, the voice that whispered, "You are just a fraud, you are just a girl with a debt," was silent. It had been silenced by 6 months of hard wins. I hadn't just decorated Anthony's life. I had optimized it. The O'Sullivan assets we seized were now legitimate revenue streams. The furniture I had identified in the warehouse sold for $4.2 million in London. The shell companies were dismantled and restructured. I wasn't just safe. I was essential. "You look dangerous when you're thinking about money." The voice came from behind me, low and intimate, sending a familiar shiver down my spine. I didn't turn immediately. I let the presence of him wash over me. Anthony Ravellini, my partner, my lover, the man who had reshaped my reality. "I'm always thinking about money," I said, turning slowly. "It's part of the job description." Anthony was standing there, looking devastating in a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders like a second skin. His arm, fully healed now, though a jagged scar remained as a souvenir of our war, was resting casually in his pocket. His dark eyes were fixed on me with a look that made the crowded room disappear. "You outdid yourself," he said, gesturing to the gallery. "The mayor is currently telling the police commissioner that you are a visionary." "The mayor is drunk on the Prosecco," I replied dryly, "and the commissioner knows exactly who runs this city, regardless of what art is on the walls." Anthony stepped closer, invading my personal space in that way he did, claiming me without touching me. "They fear you, Lucia. I saw the way Henderson looked at you. He was terrified to negotiate." "Good," I said. "Fear pays better than respect. Is that something I taught you?" "I'm a quick study." He chuckled, a rich sound that vibrated in his chest. He reached out, his fingers brushing the fabric of my dress. Tonight, I wore silver, a metallic, fluid silk that looked like poured mercury. It was cold, sharp, and undeniable. "Have you heard from the North?" I asked quietly, the code we used for my father. Anthony's expression hardened instantly. The playfulness vanished. "The report came in this morning," he said. "He's in Nome. He's working on a crab boat. It's brutal work, cold, dangerous." "Is he gambling?" "There are no casinos on a fishing trawler, Lucia, and the local bars know that if he places a bet, his kneecaps belong to me. He is miserable, he is cold, but he is alive." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure. I didn't wish him death. I just wished him irrelevance. And in the frozen dark of Alaska, Thomas Evans was finally irrelevant. "Does it bother you?" Anthony asked, watching my face closely. "No," I said honestly. It feels like a story I read a long time ago. He's a ghost. Good, because I don't want ghosts at our celebration. He checked his watch. The same Patek Philippe from the night he bought me. Wrap it up, he ordered softly. We're leaving. The auction hasn't even started, I protested. I have to close the Caravaggio. Sarah can close the Caravaggio. If she messes it up, we fire her. But I need you. Need me for what? For a private meeting, he said. Penthouse. 20 minutes. He didn't wait for an argument. He turned and walked away, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. I watched him go, feeling that familiar pull in my chest. After 6 months, the intensity hadn't faded. If anything, it had crystallized into something harder, brighter. I found Sarah, gave her a terrifying pep talk about the Caravaggio, and followed him out. The ride to the penthouse was silent, but it wasn't the heavy silence of our first car ride together. It was a comfortable silence, filled with the warmth of his hand resting on my knee and the hum of the city we now ruled together. When we arrived, the apartment was dim, lit only by the city lights spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was spectacular, a grid of gold and white stretching out to the horizon. Anthony walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of red wine, a 96 Barolo, real this time. He handed me a glass and walked to the window, staring out at his kingdom. Do you remember the night you arrived? He asked, his back to me. Vividly, I said, walking over to join him. I remember the contract, the rules, the lock on my door, the lock you never used, he noted. I didn't need to. He turned to face me. He took a sip of wine, his eyes serious. 5 years, he said. That was the deal. 5 years of service in exchange for your father's debt. I remember. We are 6 months in, he said. You have paid that debt 10 times over, Lucia. The O'Sullivan acquisition alone covered the $400,000. The gallery profits cover the interest. Technically, legally, the ledger is balanced. My heart skipped a beat. A cold feeling washed over me. Was this a breakup? Was he firing me? Are you saying my time is up? I asked carefully. Are you evicting me? Anthony reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery. I recognized the letterhead. It was the contract. The original document he had made me sign in the car that first night. He held it up. Article 4, Section 2, he recited from memory. Upon satisfaction of the debt, the collateral, Lucia Evans, shall be released from all obligations and provided with a severance package sufficient for relocation. He looked at me. You are free, Lucia. I stared at the paper. 6 months ago, that paper had been a chain. Now, looking at it, I felt a surge of panic. Freedom? Freedom meant leaving. Freedom meant a life without the adrenaline, without the power, without him. I don't want a severance package, I said, my voice tight. It's substantial, Anthony continued, ignoring me. $5 million, a clean identity, an apartment in Paris or London or Rome. You could appraise art for the Louvre. You could live a life where no one carries a gun and no one bleeds on your carpet. He held the paper over the flame of a candle burning on the side table. Anthony, don't! I stepped forward. The corner of the paper caught fire. The orange flame curled the edge, turning the legal jargon into ash. It's done, he said. He dropped the burning contract into a metal ashtray. We watched it burn. The words, collateral and owner, disappeared in smoke. The debt is paid, Anthony said, his voice rough. Your father is gone. The contract is ash. You are not a prisoner. You are not an employee. You are standing in this room because you walked in, but you can walk out. He stepped closer, his body heat radiating toward me. So I am asking you, Lucia. Not telling you. Asking you. He looked vulnerable. For the first time since I had known him, the Mafia boss looked terrified. Go to Paris, he whispered. Be safe. Be normal. Find a man who doesn't have a target on his back. I looked at the ash in the tray. Then I looked at him. I set my wineglass down on the table with a sharp clink. You're an idiot, I said. Anthony blinked, startled. Excuse me? You're a brilliant strategist, a ruthless leader, and a terrible judge of character if you think I want Paris, I said, stepping into his space, poking him in the chest with my index finger. Normal? You think I want normal? I spent 23 years being normal, Anthony. I was poor, I was scared, and I was invisible. Normal is just a nice word for powerless. I grabbed the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. I don't want safe. I want the man who broke a capo's wrist because he insulted me. I want the man who took a bullet for me. I want the man who lets me run a multi-million-dollar empire because he knows I'm smarter than his entire board of directors. Lucia, shut up. I'm negotiating. I looked around the room. I grabbed a cocktail napkin from the bar. I pulled a pen from his inside pocket. I slammed the napkin onto the marble counter and wrote quickly. My handwriting was jagged, furious. Clause 1, partnership. Clause 2, exclusivity, business in bed. Clause 3, till death do us part. I turned around and slapped the napkin onto his chest. Here, I said. New terms. Anthony took the napkin. He read it. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face, chasing away the shadow of fear. Clause 3 is legally binding in most states, he murmured. It usually requires a license. We own the mayor, I reminded him. We can get a license at 3 a.m. if we want. He looked up at me. The love in his eyes was so fierce it almost knocked the wind out of me. You really want this? He asked. This isn't a fairy tale, Lucia. It's blood and threats and looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. I know, I said. But I also know that when I look over my shoulder, you'll be there. And when you look over yours, I'll be there. I took his hand, the one with the watch, the one that had guided me out of poverty and into power. I'm not the girl in the corner anymore, Anthony. I'm the woman standing next to you. Deal with it. Anthony laughed. He tossed the napkin onto the table and pulled me into his arms, lifting me off the ground. Deal, he growled. He kissed me. It was a kiss of relief, of promise, of absolute finality. It sealed the new contract better than any notary could. So, he said, setting me down but keeping his arms locked around my waist. No Paris? Maybe for a weekend, I conceded. We can go buy some more fake art. I love you, he said. The words were simple, stark, and heavy. I love you, I replied. Now, are you going to keep talking? Or are you going to show me why I signed that exclusivity clause? Anthony's grin turned predatory. Bedroom. Now. Yes, boss. We walked toward the hallway, hand in hand. I glanced back one last time at the window. The city was still there, glowing and dangerous. Somewhere out there, new enemies were probably plotting. Somewhere, the ghost of my father was freezing. Somewhere the world was spinning on its axis of cruelty and chaos. But inside these walls, in the fortress we had built, there was order. There was loyalty. My father had cried that he had no money. He had pointed at me and said I would serve as payment. He was right, in a way. I was the payment. I was the price Anthony Ravellini paid to find his soul. And he was the reward I earned for surviving. The debt was settled. The books were closed. And as Anthony kicked the bedroom door shut behind us, locking the world out, I knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was winning, and the game was just getting started.